Okay, I think we are happening. Let me see. Except I've got this weird thing with the comments. Why? I don't want the chat overlay. Actually, I could use the chat overlay, but yeah, whatever. Okay, we'll use the chat overlay. Um, Hi. I'm Tad. I'm still Tad. As far as I know, anyway, I'm still Tad, and you are still you, and that'll work out nicely. Good to see you. I am. Let me get this thing off of my front of me here. I am here to read. I'm here to read and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. So, reading is what it's going to be. Anyway, so yeah, so I've got what they call the chat overlay on here. So I guess you can see your own comments this time, which, is whatever it is. But actually, I don't know if I need to put those on there or not. It's complicated. It's showing split screen. Let's turn the chat overlay off there just so as not to confuse people. And we'll figure it out and see if there's something we want to use there in the long run. Because I have no objection to people being able to post things to each other or whatever on the screen while I'm doing this. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is staring at my face for hours, for an hour at a stretch, which is a pretty, that's a lot to ask of even the nicest, kindest, calmest people. Anyway, so it is Sunday morning, very early, 1 o'clock, 1:02 to be more precise, here in Northern California. I am going to be reading. Don't think I have a huge amount of stuff to share this week in terms of stuff around the house kind of stuff, because basically it's just been more of the same. It's been a busy more of the same, which is why I'm a little shaggier than usual. I was going to shave tonight and do all that stuff, but first there were young people in the showers. It's like every time you go, okay, that person just showered, so I got to wait like half an hour to get the hot water back. And then you look up and somebody else has gone into the shower. And I don't know it, but at a certain point, I just went, ain't gonna happen right now. So the trimming, because for me, since trimming includes the head, it always has to be coupled with showering. Otherwise, I spend the rest of the next couple of days with little horrible hairs falling down the back of my neck, which is a grim thing at the best of times. But anyway, so not that you needed to know any of that, but then again, not that you need to know most of the things that I have to say, nor does anybody. And it's kind of you to indulge me, whether you indulge me by buying my books or you indulge me by listening to these broadcasts, watching these broadcasts, or coming to see me when I do a public reading or something like that. That's all very charming, very kind. I hope you're not just humoring me, but if that's what you're doing, hey, I'm grateful for that too. So no complaints. So anyway, anything else to talk about? Yeah, I told you guys that Into the Narrow Dark is off. I did have one last thing I forgot that I took care of this week, but so I have Into the Narrow Dark has gone off. I'm working on Navigator's Children, which is vastly complicated, and I'll tell you about it in just a moment. And then and I just received all the signature pages for the Grim Oak Press edition of Dragonbone Chair with Donato's lovely cover and illustrations. And since they're doing a special, edition that it's expensive. It's a prestige publication, and so we of course sign pages, what are called tip-in pages, because you don't sign them in the book, you sign them in piles of paper, and then they are basically tipped in to the book as it's bound. I'm sure that's why it's called that. The only other usage of the word tip in I know is from basketball, and that doesn't seem appropriate here. So, so that's the main stuff I'm doing. And then, of course, as I mentioned, I'm working on Navigator's Children. Again, back to Navigator's Children now that Narrow Dark has been effectively pushed onto the assembly line and is now out of my hands. Navigator's Children, of course, I had a long stretch of not working on it. First, because I had to wait for a while because of issues going on with publication because of the publishing company and COVID and all the results from that. And then because we had that gap, I decided that I was going to do Brothers of the Wind, which I would have been doing afterward otherwise. And I decided, yeah, actually that's good, and I'll make it even more focused on Hakatri, who's going to be, a pretty important character especially in the fourth volume, but in the third volume. So that this way it will come out before the last volume. And because of that, and then splitting Navigator Children into two books, into the Narrow Dark, which is the one I'm talking about, that's just gone off to its last journey through the mills of publication before being published this summer. And Navigator, because I split them into two volumes, I had a long stretch anyway. Long story short, I had a long stretch of not being able to really work on the end of the book. And as a result, I had time, and because of various things, I made changes with the third volume into the Narrow Dark that now have to be reflected in the fourth volume. But of course, I'd already written a lot of the fourth volume without finishing it. So the things that changed in the third volume not only have made changes to the parts I've already written, but I've rethought other things because I had that time, and I've said, I think this storyline is a little more important. I've got to bring up the focus on that. That means I have to take a little something away elsewhere so as not to overshadow that, and I have to move that around because this storyline now impacts with this storyline. So basically, what I have is what used to be one coherent novel, which was called Navigator's Children, is now split into two novels, one of which is Into the Narrow Dark, which I've now finished, but changed somewhat in the course of finishing it, because of course you have to from the first draft, while Navigator is still an unfinished first draft, of which many of its key concepts have been, if not changed, they have been monkeyed with, they have been tinkered with. And as a result, various things have to change, things have to be moved around, emphases have to be changed. So as a result, I have this manuscript now for what was the first draft version of the last half of the original Navigator's Children, and is now the first draft version of what will be Navigator's Children in full. And it's all these little bits and pieces that are moving from place to place and that are changing, and I'm certain things that I'm not sure about even yet. And so I've my manuscript, I don't know. It looks like, if you guys ever used to remember a game, if you had these in countries other than America, called Pickup Sticks, which is an old game, but it was modernized and turned into a pile of plastic sticks during the 60s or 70s in America, and you dump them out, and then the whole idea is to lift them without moving others or something. I can't remember, but basically that's what my manuscript looks like now, and I really only have a few months to finish it in, which is crazy because I still have another couple of hundred of raw pages that I have to write that haven't been written yet, at least. But on top of it now, I have to interleaf all this new stuff, take out stuff that no longer works. Anyway, it's a haystack. It's a pile of confusion now that I have to work my way through. So there are moments of despair, even in the life of the happiest, most satisfied writer. And I am definitely a happy, satisfied writer most of the time, at least in terms of my process. Not always with the results, not always with the reception of, not only with not always with the attention that I get from my peers in the industry or whatever, the criticals. I don't know what. Now critically they're pretty good to me, people are, but I definitely have a mess of a manuscript that I'm now going to have to pound into something resembling a reasonable ending to the story. Not that I can't, and in fact, the extra time that I've had because of these other things, COVID and changing the thing into two books and all this stuff. Because of all this extra time, I think it's going to be an even better book than it would have been. And in a way, like To Green Angel Tower, I think it's benefited from the extra time. I don't like making people wait longer for it. But since that's the way it worked out this time, fortunately, this time I didn't have to get divorced and move to another country to make that happen. That's what happened during to Green Angel Tower, which is another whole long story of misery and change and flea infestations and all kinds of things that happened to me during the time I was writing to Green Angel Tower. But it hasn't been anything that dramatic or that heartbreaking, but it definitely has been, a confusing, crazy time for everybody. Certainly not just me. And I've had it better than a lot of people, but it's definitely an interesting journey. But I think in the long run, the story itself, when I get it finished, when I get all this disparate material, desperate writer, disparate material combined and hammered out and everything fixed up the way I want it to be. Get the Bondo sanded down. That's an American car expression. The Bondo is the stuff that you put over the old dents and scratches and stuff, and then you sand it down, and then you put the new car paint over it. After I get it bondoed and sanded and repainted and all that, you won't ever see. I'm pretty sure, because it's people don't tend to see them on my other books. You won't see the parts where I had the most struggle, and that's okay with me. I don't want people to see the struggle. I want them to see the finished product. But anyway, so that's what's going on with me. That's the only real thing I have to mention or announce or say anything about, is that work in progress. And other than that, I'm just going to say hello to the folks who've checked in today from various parts of the world, as always, which is a lovely thing. And first up is Ronnie saying, good morning. Good morning to you, Ronnie. Good to see you. Holger, good morning or good night. And very cold but sunny Waldisloh. The penguins are not getting this flying thing, I'll tell you, Holger, but thank you for asking. I lined them up on the roof. I pointed out which direction to go, and they went right over the edge, and they just fell and lay there for a while and got up and staggered away. So I still have to work on this whole teaching penguins to fly thing. But except for a certain lack of team spirit I couldn't help noticing after the first failed flight, I think they'll come around, and I think everything will work out. Chris Fab, good morning. Out of quarantine. Does that mean you're out of quarantine? I'm still in quarantine in a sense, but not that I'm suffering from it, but we're still being a bit careful because of our daughter. But anyway, good to see you, Chris. And thanks again. Wouter, and winter is back, but it's sunny now, and we're celebrating Iris's birthday today. Well, very, very happy birthday to you, Iris, and lovely to hear from you. And there she is, next one down. And hello, good morning, and happy birthday. Happy birthday. It's a great pleasure to have you with us on your birthday. Who else we got? Mark. Hello, Mark. Ah, yes, I know you're usually in Yorkshire, but you went to an holiday to Iceland. Well, that makes total sense after a long Yorkshire winter that you would go, brr, it's been cold and wet and rainy here for so long. I'm going to go somewhere completely different. And then you'd go to Iceland. Okay. Although, believe me, I definitely plan to visit Iceland myself someday. I know it's a really cool place. And I have met many cool people from Iceland. And I'm a big Bjork fan, too. So, but anyway, it just struck me as amusing. Anyway, I hope you're having a great time there. Like I said, I'd really like to visit it. I think both the culture is really interesting, and obviously the natural beauty of the place is spectacular. So, Petra, good morning, and calling in from wintry Berlin. But it sounds like you and Christina are enjoying a nice breakfast, and that means you're probably warm and safe, and that's good. Mahmoud, good morning from sunny Belgium. How is alive? How is alive? Who is alive? I'm alive, as far as I know. Cogito ergo sum, as Rene Descartes once put it. That's the only proof I have. I could be a bot. I could be a virtual bot, although you'd think they'd come up with something more appealing than an old guy. Yeah, I've got it. Nobody will ever believe this guy's a bot because nobody would ever choose that somebody would choose to make it look like this. Anyway, good to see you, Mahmoud. If you could explain that the question that I'm misunderstanding, but I'm fine. We're fine here. The whole family is fine. I'm glad to hear that you seem to be doing well too, and I hope you and your family are well. Kristen, hello, Kristen. Yes, we fixed the split screen thing. That was because I had accidentally, without understanding really quite how I did it, I set it on putting the comments on the screen. But I want to experiment with that a bit more before I start doing it. Chris is replying to somebody else. Petra, already said hello to Petra. Yes, without the overlay. Okie dokie dokie. We got lots of people, but only a few saying hello. Anamika, hello, good morning, good to see you. Alan David Clark. See, I wish I had a name like that. That would have been so much better for being a fantasy and a science fiction writer. Would be called something like Alan David Clark, instead of Tad. you know, but I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you something. I'm sharing a little detail, a true and kind of embarrassing detail about my life. When I was having my first book published, Tail Chaser's Song, and my publisher said, "Are you going to use Tad as your author name, right?" And honestly, the reason I said yes, not that I hate my name, but it doesn't really fit sometimes with who I think I am or who I felt like when I was younger, and I always felt I should have a kind of a cooler, more English sounding name. Tad is either usually short for Thaddeus, which it's not with me, obviously, since it's not short for anything. It's a nickname. Or it's a very preppy name. It's like one of those Jim Backus, Lovey, let's go sailing with Tad and the fellows today. It's a very preppy, we would say, which means prep school. It just never has fit with me because that's not who I am or how I was growing up or anything like that. We were just a normal middle class family in California, not a old money yachting family. So I actually had this option. At that point, I could have changed my name. I could have gone for something more stately, like I could have been. My real name is Robert Paul Williams, but it's the only people ever use are telemarketers and substitute teachers. So I could have been like R. Paul Williams or something cool like that, or Alan David Clark. I could have called myself anything. But I actually said, well, someday up the line, some people that I used to go to school with, who I like and stuff like that, who might have lost touch with, and they might see my book and go, oh, and the only Tad Williams I ever knew was this guy we used to go to high school with or whatever. So that was really the reason that I stuck with the name, not because I thought, oh, I have the perfect name for an author, because I don't really. But anyway, so let me see. If I said hello, right? Julian. Oh, of course, it's Julian because Julian is checking in from Kassel. Julian, hello. Jeremy, hello. And who else have we got here that I haven't said hello to yet? Now, see, everybody's now talking to each other. David checks in. Hello, David, checking in from Oz, which in this case is almost certainly Australia. Although I do have a fairly strong following in the Quadling countries, and I've got a few fans in Winky Land as well. But I think he's probably referring to Australia. Hello, David. Good to have you. Doug, hello from Arizona. Arizona? That's the weirdest sounding European country I've ever heard of. Anyway, lovely to have you with us, Doug. Good, Arizona. I like Arizona. Got lots of friends in Arizona. And I had a signing there once and was met by a bunch of cool friends from the industry and people they brought along. At Jennifer Roberson and Mike Stackpole and some others. And we were like sitting outside after I did the reading and the signing and all that stuff. And we were in Phoenix. And it's 104 degrees at almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And I said, this is really interesting. But I am too much of a Northern Californian to be able to live with this. I'm not good in hot weather. All my people, genetically speaking, all my people, look at my skin. Look at the pallid quality of my skin. All of my people, in as far as I know, in my genetic lineage, all come from little dark, wet corners of Europe originally. And this is true. The only part of my heritage that I know about for certain: Wales, Scotland, Ireland, northern Germany, Norway. Those are the ones I know about for certain. And, as I said, these are all dark, cold, wet places for most of the year. So I said, I'm just not an Arizona kind of person. The people are lovely. The town was great. It was a great gig. Every time I've gone to Arizona, and I've done lots of things in Arizona over the years, been in Tucson, been in Flagstaff, been in Phoenix, been, in Williams, Arizona. Had a car breakdown and wound up in Williams, Arizona. So I love Arizona, great place, but I am just too Northern Californian and too Northern European to feel entirely comfortable with that much heat. So anyway, another pointless excursion on my part. So I'm going to start reading. But so hello to all of you. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. It's always a surprise that anybody really wants to listen to me read, let alone read from my own books that I wrote, which seems like the most ridiculous kind of self-importancing, if there's such a word. Anyway, so the last thing we were reading, it was Orlando. And Orlando had been doing, he'd lost touch with Gardner. Orlando Gardner lost touch with his friend Fredericks, Sam Fredericks, and has just found out that he finally tracked Sam Fredericks down and found out that Sam Fredericks is actually female. She is a girl, roughly Orlando's age, named Salome Fredericks. And he was shocked. He was shocked not so much by the fact of her being a girl, but as the fact that they had been online friends for a couple of years and very close and done tons of things together. And it feels to him a bit like a betrayal. So he has just been going through doing his usual death simulation things where he's, that's one of the ways he deals with his problems. And then Beazle has just broken in to his simulation that he's been doing of a science fiction death struggle with a bunch of bug-like aliens. And another kind of bug, Beelzebug, has just showed up and said, "Boss, hey, boss, let those poor imitations alone. I gotta talk to you." Damn it, Beazle. I hate it when you do that. It was just starting to get good. And God knew distraction had been hard enough to come by during the last week. He looked around at his cot with irritation. Even without the trophies, it still looked pretty dismal. The decor definitely needed to be changed. "Sorry, but you told me you wanted to know if you had a contact from that Wicked Tribe group." "They're on the line?" "No, but they just sent you a message. You want to see it?" Orlando suppressed his irritation. "Just damn it, play it." A congregation of yellow squiggles appeared in the middle of the room. Orlando frowned and brought up the magnification. At the point where he could see the figures clearly, they had very poor resolution. Either way, squinting at the fuzzy forms made his eyes hurt. The monkeys hovered in a small orbital cloud. As one of them spoke, the others went on smacking each other and flying in tight circles. "Wicked Tribe, we'll meet you," said the foreground simian, melodramatic presentation belied by the pushing and shoving in the background. The spokesmonkey wore the same cartoonish grin as all the others, and Orlando could not tell whether the voice was one he'd heard before or not. "Wicked Tribe will meet you in special secret Tribe Club bunker in Treehouse." A time and note address flashed up full of childish misprintings. The message ended. Orlando frowned. "Send a return message, Beazle. Tell them I can't get into Treehouse, so they either have to get me in or else meet me here in the inner district." "Got it, boss." Orlando sat himself in midair and looked at the MBC window. The little digging drones were still hard at work, pursuing their goals with mindless application. Orlando felt strange. He should have been excited, or at least satisfied. He had opened up a connection back into Treehouse, but instead he felt depressed. They're little kids, he thought. Just micros. And I'm going to trick them into doing what? Breaking the law? Helping me hack into something? And what if I'm right and there are big time people involved in this? Then what am I getting them into? And for what? For a picture, an image. Oh, actually, I've just sort of realized. Sorry, I actually skipped back. Now, you folks wouldn't necessarily have heard it, but I just skipped back a page and a half. Sorry. So Orlando has just been, he's made this contact, and and then he has a conversation with her. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So I'm going to skip forward to Orlando. It's Orlando having another conversation with Beazle after making getting this invitation from the Wicked Tribe. Wait! Orlando lowered his voice to a whisper. I think I need to make a call. Just let me lose the legs, boss. Beazle clambered awkwardly down the bed frame, heading for the floor. Beazle's in his robot body, which looks like a little centipede or something. I'll meet you online. The doors of the last... Yes, this is where we left off, sorry. The doors of the Last Chance Saloon swung open. An axe murderer politely dragged his victim to one side before returning to active dismemberment. The figure that stepped over the spreading puddle of blood had the familiar broad shoulders and thick weightlifter's neck. Fredericks also had what seemed to be a certain wariness on his sim face as he sat down. He? Orlando felt a kind of despair. She? I got your message. Orlando shook his head. I just didn't want to... He took a breath and started again. I don't know. I'm pretty scorched, but mostly in a weird way. Know what I mean? Fredericks nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess. So, what do I call you? Fredericks? That was a tough one, huh? A smile briefly touched the broad face. Yeah, but I mean, you're a girl. I think of you as a guy. That's okay. I think of myself as a guy, too, when I'm stringing around with you. Orlando sat quiet for a moment, sensing that this particular unexplored country might be treacherous. You mean you're trans? No, his friend shrugged. Sometimes I get bored being a girl. So when I first started going on the net, sometimes I was a boy, that's all. Nothing unusual, really. Fredericks did not sound quite as certain as he or she might have liked. But it's kind of awkward when you get to be friends with someone. I noticed. He said it with his best Johnny Ice Pick sneer. So, do you like boys, or are you gay, or what? Fredericks made a noise of disgust. I like boys fine. I have lots of friends who are boys. I have lots of friends who are girls, too. Shit, Gardner, you're just as bad as my parents. They think I have to make all these life decisions just because I'm growing breasts. For a moment, Orlando felt the world totter. The concept of Fredericks with breasts was more than he was able to deal with at the moment. So, that's it? You're just gonna be a guy? I mean, when you're online? Fredericks nodded again. I guess. It wasn't a total lie, Orlando. When I'm hanging around with you, I feel like a guy. Orlando snorted. How would you know? Fredericks looked hurt, then angry. I get stupid and I act like the whole world revolves around me. That's how. Against his better judgment, Orlando laughed. So, what are we supposed to do? Just keep on being guys together? I guess so. Frederick shrugged. If you can handle it. Orlando felt his anger soften a little. There were certainly important things he hadn't told Frederick, so it was hard to sustain much self-righteousness. But it was still difficult to wrap his mind around the idea. Well, he said at last, I guess. He couldn't think of any way to end the sentence that wouldn't sound like a bad net flick. He settled for, I guess it's okay then. It was an incredibly stupid thing to say, and he wasn't sure it was okay, but he left it at that for now. Anyway, this all started because I was trying to find you. Where have you been? Why didn't you answer my messages? Fredericks eyed him, perhaps trying to decide if they had found a kind of equilibrium again. I was scared, Gardner. And if you think it's because I'm really a girl or some fen-fen like that, I'm going to kill you. Scared of what happened in Treehouse? Of everything. You've been weird ever since you saw that city, and it just keeps getting more and more scanny. What's next? We try to overthrow the government or something? We wind up in the execution chamber for the cause of Orlando Gardnerism? I just don't want to get into any more trouble. Trouble? What trouble? We just got chased out of Treehouse by a bunch of old Akisushi. Frederick shook his head. It's more than that, and you know it. What's going on, Gardner? What is it about this city that's got you so obsessed? Orlando weighed the choices. Did he owe something to Frederick? Some kind of honesty? But his friend had not told him anything of his own secret voluntarily. It had been Orlando who had ferreted out the truth. I can't explain. Not now. But it's important. I just know it is. And I think I've found a way to get us back into Treehouse. What? Frederick shouted. The other patrons of the Last Chance Saloon, used to death rattles and agonized shrieks, did not even turn to look. Go back? Are you scanning to the uttermost degree? Maybe. He was finding it hard to get his breath again. He turned down the volume for another body-shaking cough. Maybe, he repeated when he could speak again. But I need you to come with me. You're my friend, Fredericks, whatever you are. In fact, I'll tell you one secret anyway. You're not just my best friend. You're my only friend. Fredericks brought hands to face, as though to block out the sight of a world in pain. When he spoke, it was with doomful resignation. Oh, Gardner, you bastard. That's really unfair. Chapter 29, Tomb of Glass. Netfeed, Entertainment. Blackness wins Palme d'Or. Visual, Ostrand, accepting prize. Voiceover. Pika Ostrand seemed unsurprised at winning the grand prize at this year's Nîmes Film Festival, although most of the other insiders on the beaches and in the bars were stunned. Ms. Ostrand's 4-hour film Blackness, which, except for low-light effects and subliminal sonics, contains nothing but the blackness of the title, was considered too miserablist to please the usually conservative judges. Visual, Ostrand at press conference. Ostrand. It is what it is. If you tell some people about smoke, they want to see the fire too. One moment, there was only the light of the fire Kabu had built, a soft red glow which left the corners and high places of the lab their mysteries. Then, following a series of clicks, the overhead fixtures sprang back on, washing white brilliance into every cranny. You did it, Martine! Rini clapped her hands. Every Pinetown resident's dream. Free electricity. I can't take all the credit. The humble deity's voice now echoed from the built-in wall speakers, filling the room. I could not have done it without Mr. Singh. I had to get past some very formidable power company security before I could redistribute the electricity usage information to hide the trail. That's all very nice, but can I go now and do some goddamn work? Singh sounded genuinely irritated. This entire folly presupposes me being able to get through Otherland's defenses in the next few days. So if I don't manage to crack that, all this means is that you found yourselves some really ugly-looking bathtubs. Of course, said Renee quickly. She definitely wanted and needed to stay on the old man's good side. She thanked him and Martine again, then let them disconnect. You can close the outside door and take the jack out of the car phone, she announced to Jeremiah, who had been waiting on the now functional phone at the entrance. We have electricity and data lines now, and they should both be untraceable. I'm doing it, Renee. Even through the small pad speaker, she could hear the outside door beginning to grind down. A moment later, he came back on. I don't like seeing that door close. I feel like I'm being locked in a tomb. Not a tomb at all, she said, ignoring her own quite similar impressions. Unless it's Lazarus' tomb you're talking about, because this is where we're finally going to start fighting back. Come downstairs. We've still got a lot of work to do. She looked up to see her father watching her. She thought he looked scornful. Well, we are going to fight back, and we are going to see Stephen back among the living again, Papa. So don't give me that look. What look? God help me, girl, I don't know what you're talking about sometimes. As soon as the lights had come back on, Kabu had put out the fire. Now, as he stirred the last few embers with a stick, he turned to Renee. There have been many things happening, he said, happening very fast. Perhaps we should sit and talk, all of us, about what we will do next. Renee considered, then nodded. But not now. I'm really anxious to get these V-tanks checked out. Can we do it this evening, before bed? Kabu smiled. If anyone is the elder upon whose wisdom we rely, Renee, here in this place it is you. This evening would be a good time, I think. The preliminary news seemed to be better even than Renee had hoped. The V-tanks, although cumbersome compared to more recent interface devices, seemed to have the potential to do what she needed, allow her long-term access and much more sophisticated sensory input and output than anything she had used at the Poly. Only an actual implant would have been better in terms of responsiveness, but there were some advantages to the V-tanks that even an implant couldn't match. Because they seemed to have been expressly developed for long-term use, the tanks were fitted out with feeding, hydration, and waste processing equipment, so that with only occasional assistance, the user could be almost completely independent. But what is that stuff? Her father stared into the opened casket, his mouth twisted in distaste. Smell like something foul. It's gel. She reached her hand down and touched it with her finger. At least it will be. Long Joseph cautiously extended one of his own calloused digits and tapped on the translucent material. This is no jelly, or if it is, it's all dried up and nasty. This is some kind of plastic. Renee shook her head. It needs to be hooked up properly. You'll see, when you run a very mild current through it, it gets harder or softer, colder or warmer in any part of the gel you want. Then there's the micro pumps. She pointed to the array of pinprick holes on the inside wall of the tank, to adjust the pressure. And the processors, the computer brains of the thing, will sense whenever you push back against the gel. That's the output part. That's why it makes such a good interface. It can mimic almost anything in a simulation. Wind on your skin, rock under your feet, humidity, you name it. He looked at her with a mixture of suspicion and pride. You learn about all this stuff at that school you went to. Some of it. I read a lot about this plasmodal process because for a while it was going to be the next big thing. They still use it for other industrial stuff, I think. But most of the high-end computer interfaces now are direct neural connections. Long Joseph stood up and regarded the 10-foot-long tank. And you say that you put electricity in here? Right in this thing? In the jelly? That's what makes it work. He shook his head. Well, girl, I don't care what you say. Only a fool climbs into a bathtub full of electricity. I won't get into something like that, ever. Reenie's smile was a little sour. That's right, Papa. You won't. It had been a very successful afternoon, Reenie thought. With help from Martine, who had maintained her connection to whatever, no doubt quite illicit, source of information had brought them here in the first place, they had begun to understand how the V-tanks could be made ready. It would not be easy. Reenie figured it would be several days' worth of hard going at least, but in the end they should be able to make the things work. The military had done more to help them than simply leave much of the equipment in place. The automated systems that had kept the underground locations safe from intrusion, until now anyway, had also kept the air dry and the gross machinery of the place in working order. Several of the tanks had still suffered damage from neglect, but Reenie had no doubt that if they cannibalized a few parts, they could get at least one and perhaps more online. The computers themselves, which would supply the processing power, were hopelessly old-fashioned, but they were the biggest and best of their day. Reenie thought that, by a similar process of robbing Peter to pay Paul, they could get enough CPUs working that a software alteration or two, something else they would need the old hacker Singh to accomplish, would enable them to get the power and speed necessary to make the V-tanks perform. She scraped her spoon in the bottom of the bowl, finishing off the casserole Jeremiah had made, and risked a small sigh of content. Prospects were still bleak, but they were far less hopeless than they had seemed a few days ago. Reenie, we said tonight we would talk. Even Kabu's quiet voice echoed in the huge, empty dining room. We're just about out of food, for one thing, Jeremiah reminded her. There must be emergency rations here somewhere, Reenie said. This place was built during the first Antarctica war scare, I think. They probably made this place capable of being self-sufficient for years. Jeremiah gave her a look of undisguised horror. Emergency rations? Do you mean meat cubes and powdered milk? Horrid things like that? Oh, sorry, that's not Jeremiah's voice. Jeremiah gave her a look of undisguised horror. Emergency rations? Do you mean meat cubes and powdered milk? Horrid things like that? Do you remember what happened to you the last time you tried to use your card? You can only use cash so many times before someone notices, especially outside the inner city. Not that we have much cash left anyway. So what does that mean? He pointed to the casserole dish. No more fresh food. Reenie took a breath, struggling to be patient. Jeremiah, this is not a holiday. This is a serious business. The people we are after killed Dr. Van Bleek. He gave her an angry, pained look. I know that. Then help me. The whole point of being here is to give us a chance to get into this other land. I still think it's crazy, her father said. Come all this way, all this work just to play some computer trick. How all this going to help Stephen? Do I need to explain it again? This Otherland thing is a network, an incredibly big and fast VR network like no other. And it's also a secret people will kill for. It belongs to the people who hurt Stephen.
and a lot of other children. The people who murdered Dr. Van Bleek and probably firebombed our flat and got me fired from the poly. Not to mention all of Mr. Singh's friends who worked on it with him and are now dead. These are rich people, powerful people. No one can get to them. No one can take them to court. And what would we say even if we got them there? All we have are suspicions, and pretty crazy sounding suspicions they are too. So we need to get inside this other land. If something about that network is the reason for what's happened to Stephen and other children, if they are using it to run black market organ farms or as the centerpiece of some kind of child pornography cult or something we can't even imagine yet, some kind of political power play or cornering the world market in something, then we need to get proof.
She looked around the table. At last, even her father was being attentive. Rini felt a rare moment of confidence and control.
If we can get a V-tank up and running, and if Singh can crack Otherland's network security, I'm going in with him. The tanks are meant to work long term with very little maintenance. That means there won't be much for the three of you to do once I've got my IVs and oxygen going. Maybe just check on things every now and then. I think that Kabu alone should be able to do that. So what about us? Asked her father. Just sit around while you playing in your jelly bath? I don't know. I guess that's why we need to talk. To plan. What about Stephen? I'm supposed to sit here while that boy's still sick in the hospital. That quarantine thing not gonna last forever. I don't know, Papa. Jeremiah's worried about his mother too. But remember, these people don't hesitate to kill when they need to. At the very least, if you got caught outside, you'd both get picked up and detained.
She shrugged.
I don't know anything else you can do except stay here.
During the long silence that followed, Rini looked up to see Kabu watching her. He had a strange, abstracted expression. Before she could ask him what he thought, a beep from the wall speaker made them all jump.
I have found some more information about the tanks, Martine announced, and have downloaded it to the laboratory memory. Also, Segar Singh called me to say that he has hit a rough patch, as he calls it, and says that you should not get up your hopes he will be able to help you with the tank software. What does that mean? I am not sure. The security system is very complicated for this Otherland network, and it is not very much used, so he finds it hard to work without attracting attention. He says it is only a chance of 50-50 he will be able to break in.
Rini felt her insides sink.
I suppose we've never had odds much better than that with any of this, from the start. But he also said that if he can do it, you must be ready to go very quickly. Wonderful. So he won't be able to help us, but we have to get the tanks ready right away?
Martine's laugh was rueful.
So, there's something like that, yes. But I will help as much as I can, Rini. You've already been more help than I can say.
Rini sighed. Her buoyant spirits had collapsed, punctured by reality.
We all will do what we have to do. Martine, I have a question, Kabu said. Is it true that the data lines from this place are shielded? That they will not give us away if we use them? Shielded is not what I would say. I have routed them through various nodes which feed them through randomly chosen outgoing lines. That way a trace will only follow them as far back as the last node, and there's no obvious connection from that node to the original source. It is a common practice. What does all that mean? Asked Long Joseph. So we can use the lines going in and out of here, even to ship data? Kabu seemed to want something clarified. Yes, you should still use them responsibly. I would not call telemorphics or UN com and taunt them. God, no, Rini said in horror. Nobody around here is going to ask for trouble, Martine. We already have enough. Good. Does that answer your question? It does, Kabu nodded. Why did you want to know that? Rini asked the small man after Martine had ended her call. For one of the first times since she had known him, Kabu looked uncomfortable. I would prefer not to say at this moment, Rini, but I promise you I will not do anything irresponsible, as Martine warned. She was tempted to push him for an answer, but felt that after what they had been through, he deserved her trust. I didn't think you would, Kabu. If the phone lines are safe, I could call my mother, Jeremiah said eagerly. Rini felt a heavy weariness. I think that falls under the heading of asking for trouble, Jeremiah. If they've managed to put a hold on your cards, then they've also probably managed to get a tap on your mother's phone line. But that Martine said the calls couldn't be traced. Probably, Rini sighed again, probably. But she also said don't ask for trouble. And calling a number that's almost certainly tapped is asking for trouble. Jeremiah's face darkened in anger. You're not my master, young lady. You don't tell me what to do. Before she could reply, and it would have been with some heat, Kabu spoke up. Rini is doing her best for all of us. None of us is happy, Mr. Dako. Instead of being angry, perhaps there is some other solution. Grateful for his intervention, Rini followed his lead. That's a good idea, Kabu. Jeremiah, are there any of your relatives we could reach through our public kiosk? She knew that in Pinetown, among those who couldn't afford a regular data line service, many people used the communal kiosks and would fetch whatever neighbors were called. I doubt they'd tap every single kiosk near every one of your relatives. We haven't been declared public enemies, so this stuff has to be done fairly quietly. As Jeremiah paused to think, his anger diffused. Rini smiled at Kabu, letting him know she appreciated his help. The little man still looked troubled. We have 2 tanks that are complete, said Kabu. Rini turned from her inspection of one of the objects in question. She had been testing a handful of rubber-sheathed fiber links which hung from the tank's lid, like the tentacles of an octopus dangling from a rock crevice. I know. That way we have a backup if something goes wrong with the first one. Kabu shook his head. That is not what I mean, Rini. We have 2, but you are thinking that you will go by yourself. But that is not right. I have accompanied you before. We are friends. You want to break into this Otherland system with me? For heaven's sake, Kabu, haven't I got you into enough trouble already? And in any case, I'm not going in by myself. Seem's going, and maybe Martine as well. There is more to it than that. You are exposing yourself to more danger. Do you not remember the Kali? We have stood by each other, and should do so again. Rini saw by his stubborn look that this would not end quickly. She let go of the snaky fibers. But she suddenly could not think of an argument. More, she realized how much better she would feel if Kabu did accompany her. She still felt compelled to make a token protest. But who will take care of things out here if we're both online? I told you this could last days, maybe weeks. Jeremiah is intelligent and responsible. Your father is also capable if he understands the importance. And as you said yourself, there is not much that needs to be done except to monitor us. So it's us already.
She couldn't help but smile.
I I don't know. I suppose you have as much right as I do. My life too has been caught up in this.
The small man remained serious.
I have made the journey with you willingly. I could not turn back at this point.
She felt suddenly as though she might cry. He was so stern, so grave, and yet no larger than a boy. He had taken on her responsibilities as though they were his own, seemingly without a second thought. That kind of loyalty was so strange as to be a little frightening.
How did this man become so dear to me so quickly?
The thought bloomed with surprising force.
He's like a brother. A brother my own age, not a child like Stephen who needs to be looked after.
Or was there more to it than that? Her feelings were confused.
Okay then.
She turned back to the fiber links, afraid that the warmth in her cheeks might show, might send him some sign she did not wish sent.
You asked for it. If Jeremiah and my father say yes, then you and I go together. I still say you crazy girl, her father said. It's not as dangerous as you think, Papa.
She lifted the thin, flexible mask.
This fits over your face. It's not that different from what a diver wears. See, there's a place where it locks down over your eyes. That's so the retinal projection stays focused. Retinal projection just means it shoots a picture into the back of your eye. That's pretty much how you normally see, so it makes the visual input feel very real. And here's how you breathe.
She pointed to 3 valves, 2 small, 1 large, that made a triangle.
This fits over your nose and mouth, a very tight seal, and the air is pumped in and out through these tubes. Simple. As long as you and Jeremiah keep an eye on the air mixture, we'd be fine.
Long Joseph shook his head.
I can't stop you, so I won't even try. But if something goes all wrong, don't you come to blame it on me. Thanks for that vote of confidence.
She turned to Jeremiah.
I hope you've been paying attention anyway. I'll keep a close eye on everything.
He looked at the wall screen a little nervously.
You're just testing it now, right? You're only going in for a short while? Maybe as little as 10 minutes. Maybe a bit longer. Just to make sure we've got everything hooked up properly.
She stared at the tape bundles of fiber links stretching between the 2 tanks and the old-fashioned processors.
Keep a close eye on the vital function readings, okay? I've tested everything as well as I can, but even with Martine and her schematics, there are so many damned hookups. I'm not certain about anything.
She turned to Kabu, who was rechecking his own tank connection by connection, just as he had seen her do.
Are you ready? If you are, Rini. Okay, what should we do? Some simple 3D manipulations like the ones I used to teach you back at the Poly? Those should be comfortably familiar. Certainly. And then, perhaps, something else. Like what? Let us wait and see.
He turned away to unkink mask connectors, which had surely been unkinked long before. Rini shrugged.
Jeremiah, can you turn on the tanks now? The main power switches.
There was a click, then a quiet hum. For a brief instant, the overhead lights flickered. Rennie leaned forward to stare into the tank. What appeared to be hard, translucent plastic filling three-fourths of the tank turned foggily opaque. A few moments later, the substance went clear again, but now seemed to be a liquid. Tiny ripples appeared in its surface, thousands of them in concentric whorls like fingerprints. But before she could make out the larger pattern, the ripples subsided. And I'm going to stop there on ripples subsided, which somebody may have to remind me of when I start reading next. Oh, well, it's only tomorrow night, so you guys may not be here, most of you, to do that. Anyway, so with all of that, I'm going to put it to bed for the night, at least put the story to bed for the night. Thank you for joining me. It is a pleasure, as always, to spend time with you. Lily has come by to say hello as well. Right, Lily? Yeah, did you hear? Lily says, hello. There she is. And I thank you as well. And I send you all my best greetings and my wish for blessings on your houses. And I think that's pretty much it. So take good care of yourselves. Take good care of the folks around you, your loved ones, your friends, your neighbors. Help where you can, and we will all get through this together. So once again, good night. Peace. See whoever wants to join me tomorrow or today at 7 p.m. And for the rest of you, I will see you next week. Thank you very much. Ciao.